Did slaves build the pyramids? That question is more complicated than it might appear on the surface. That's what we're going to talk about on this episode of Ancient Egypt and the Bible. The topic of slavery and the construction of the pyramids of Egypt is often debated, but the whole debate can be simplified when viewed through the social strata of ancient Egypt. Now, when we talk about the construction of pyramids, we are talking about a period of time from the third dynasty reign of King Zoser until the first king of Dynasty 18, which was Akhmet I. But before we begin here, let's clear up a common misconception, which is the idea that the Israelites built the pyramids. This is actually not true. The Israelites were not involved in the construction of the pyramids. The Israelites were enslaved at the beginning of the 18th dynasty and remained in Egypt until the mid-19th dynasty. So the Israelites were in servitude after the age of the pyramids. So the Israelites were not involved in any way regarding the construction of pyramids, but they were involved in other building projects, particularly the building of storage cities for temples. But that's a different story. Now, the building of a pyramid is a complex process. It involved many different occupations, and those occupations were defined through their social class. The pyramids of the third and fourth dynasties, these include the massive pyramids on the Giza Plateau, are made primarily of stone. In the case of the Giza pyramids, most of that limestone came from quarries that were local to the pyramids. And the workers in those particular quarries were associated with the workers' village. Now, what makes a workers' village so interesting is that these are accommodations that were afforded to the craftsman class. So the original quarry workers at Giza were not slaves. They were actually craftsmen. They were people who this was their day-to-day job. This is what they got paid to do. And yes, they got paid. They got paid in the form of food, medical supplies, wine. In fact, we got a lot of evidence that the original pyramid builders were very well taken care of. They ate knucklebone soup, beef, fish, bread. They probably had onions and leeks. They also had wine and oil. So they were very, very well taken care of. We even have evidence that they had medical supplies. You don't give medical supplies to slaves. You just tell them to tough it out. So it's clear that those people who worked on the Giza Plateau were of this craftsman class. And it seems that from that point onward, most of those who worked on, say, the stone aspects, the stone workers, they were part of this craftsman class. But they weren't the only laborers involved. The pyramids of Giza also used fine limestone from the Tura quarries and red granite from Aswan. Those quarries were located near the Nile River. And quarries were also places where prisoners awaited trial. Quarries were, and in fact, the deeper in the desert quarry was situated, the more that would have been associated with, say, prisons and jails. So think of it this way. When Joseph was put in a jail after his incident with Potiphar, he's not in a place where there's walls and bars and doors and anything like that. He was just placed in a quarry in the middle of the desert. And the expectation here is that prisoners don't run away from a quarry because there's nowhere to go. It's hot. You're basically sleeping out in the open, cold at night, hot in the day. A lot of prisoners didn't survive working in the quarries just because they were forgotten about and the conditions were exceptionally hard. If Pharaoh never addressed your crime, you probably died out in that quarry. So that was typically how quarry work was done. It was, if it was done not by craftsmen, it was generally then done by prisoners. Okay, so stuff where you had like really nice stone out more deeper into, say, the Western Desert, yeah, those would have been done by prisoners. So we have to assume that at least some of the work done on the pyramids was done by those who were awaiting trial as prisoners. Pyramid construction starts to change in Dynasty 5. The kings of Old Kingdom Egypt discovered that building pyramids was expensive. Horrendously expensive. The more stone you needed, the more you had to pay craftsmen to finish it, the more you had to support these quarries to mill it. It was just a horrendously difficult, expensive proposition. So beginning in Dynasty 5, the kings of Egypt started to make pyramids with the core of the pyramid being made out of mud brick. Now, mud bricks were made by slaves, particularly slaves from the Levant. Already by the 4th dynasty, the beginning of the 4th dynasty, Senefru is bringing slaves into Egypt for the purpose of making mud bricks. And those slaves assisted in the construction of the pyramids insofar as these slaves had to make mud brick supports for pyramid construction. But in early Dynasty 4 and throughout Dynasty 4, slaves don't seem to be involved directly in the construction of pyramids, except as, say, doing the supporting apparatus for pyramid construction. As I said, in, like, for example, the making of palaces and housing for, say, other classes of workers to do their jobs. But it's really in Dynasty 5 when pyramids start being made with the core of the pyramid being made of mud brick, and then the casing stones on the outside being made of like granite or limestone, that we start seeing slaves come involved in earnest in the production of pyramids. And it's almost entirely with regard to that making of mud brick. Okay? So then, when we describe the construction of a pyramid, several social strata were involved by the 5th dynasty. Prisoners were working in the quarries. Slaves were making mud bricks. And craftsmen were used to architect, assemble, and refine stonework needed to excavate the burial chamber and complete the pyramid's construction. So, when we talk about slaves being involved in making pyramids, it's complicated. The Great Pyramids of Giza that we think of as sort of the idealized pyramid, that had almost no slave involvement at all. Whereas, say, in the case of the 5th dynasty pyramids, slaves were heavily involved in the construction of pyramids. So, anyway, I hope you learned something from this and you found this interesting. Thank you very much for watching. We'll see you next time on Ancient Egypt and the Bible.